And remember, with cats, they're very sensitive creatures. So you always want to start slow with them, introducing usually just protein. They are not the ones that are needing a bunch of carbs or vegetables of any sort, just offering protein. They can be particular about the texture of food. They can be particular about the temperature of food as well too. So again, it is definitely a trial and error with with good old cats.
Do you have cats?
I do not have cats.
No.
I grew up with cats, but I don't have any. Yeah.
I'm not opposed to cats. I like cats. I don't read them as well as I read dogs.
Yes,
So dogs are my jam.
Yeah.
From CareCredit, it's Care Experts, a podcast where we dive deep into the health and pet care industry with the professionals that make it happen. I'm Antonio Diaz, and this is Logan. Today, we're joined by Dr. Arielle Walton, a veterinarian, certified veterinary acupuncturist, and founder of Paws Acupuncture of Nashville, a mobile clinic dedicated to bringing integrative care directly to pets. She's passionate about helping pets thrive through personalized preventative care, including nutrition that focuses on real whole foods. So, whether you're curious about making the switch or you just want to know what to look for in your pet's current food, this episode will help you make more informed diet choices for your pet. Dr. Arielle, I'm so happy to have you here. When I found out that I was going to be chatting with you about whole foods, I was stoked because that's kind of my thing, although not my profession. But I would love to hear more about what got you into that, because it's kind of a niche thing in the veterinary world. I think not a lot of veterinarians kind of specialize in nutrition and a whole foods approach. So I'd love to hear how you got into that.
Yes, you're right. A lot of vets do not necessarily specialize in nutrition, but I entered the realm of nutrition just starting with just holistic and looking at a pet holistically. And we can throw as many things as we want, as many medications as we want at them, but if we don't take care of that foundation of diet and nutrition, then our results are going to be very minimal.
I agree.
Adding in good food is medicine, really makes a profound difference in pets' health and just when it comes to illnesses and recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. With regard to you defining whole foods, how would you define that? Because I know for me, I feed a raw diet, so that's where my mind goes to.
Yeah.
But I also, like, when I speak to my clients about that, I always say that you can absolutely cook your food. So how would you define that from your own perspective?
Yeah, so whole food diet is going to be real ingredients that are not processed, or I should say minimally processed. So that is kind of the umbrella term. Whole foods is an umbrella term, but we're looking at minimally processed, whole, real ingredient, real food, similar to what you and I would eat.
Sure. And then does that mean, do you include raw in that, or do you personally not necessarily touch the realm of raw food? So
when we say whole foods, it's an umbrella term. So we have our raw, we have our gently cooked, and then we have our more home cooked diet, which is a little more cooked. So they all fall under the umbrella of whole food diets.
Okay. When you mention whole food, do you find that people often don't know what you're talking about?
All the time. Yeah. So that's why we have to go into detail. And a lot of people think when you say whole food, they immediately go to raw as well too. So we have to go into details and say, hey, there are levels to this. There are different types of diets in which you can provide a whole food diet.
Gotcha. So what would be some of the benefits that you've seen? Like, let's say some immediate changes that somebody would notice when they start switching to a whole food diet.
I would say the first one is going to be weight loss.
Okay.
If they need it, you know, and even if they don't need it, and that's where you want to have a vet on board with you and helping you, because one, whole food diets are not going to contain as many carbohydrates as your kibble-based diet. Also, they are heavy with water content as opposed to dry food as well too. So that's the immediate first thing. Second is GI issues, resolution of GI issues if they had anything. If they did not have any type of GI condition of any sort, better stool. Their stool looks good. It's not dry. It's not soup. It's not mushy. It looks like a perfect poop.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And so for anyone listening and watching, I often tell people, you'd be surprised at what I would say real poop looks like when the dog is consuming real food. Are there any things that people should be mindful of and look out for? Because I know, like you said, when you mention that, sometimes people think chicken and rice, and that's obviously, nutritionally speaking, very deficient for them.
So you want to make sure that it's balanced, and that can look that can be in many different ways. So
Gotcha.
one, we can have an addition. We're just topping the food off with some whole fresh foods. So we don't necessarily have to worry about balance. If you still have them on, let's say, at least 70% of the balanced diet, then we can throw as many things as we want on top of their diet without having to balance it. But when we're starting to get into, hey, I want this to be their primary diet, that is where you want to make sure that your diet that you're feeding has been balanced by a veterinarian, that you're either reached out to a veterinary nutritionist or a veterinarian who is skilled and familiar and comfortable with recommending whole food diets.
Gotcha. And when you talk about balance, I immediately think of, like, from my own perspective, nutritionally, if I'm eating a balanced diet, I'm looking more at like macronutrients, like carbs, proteins, fats. Do you tend to focus on the same thing, or are you looking more in terms of like micronutrients, with like regards to like magnesium or anything like that realm?
Right. Yes, we are. And owners, more so when they think about a balanced diet, they're thinking about those macronutrients.
Yeah.
Oh, I put some greens in their food, but we are specifically talking about the micronutrients because that differs from humans to animals. They have different nutritional needs, and they can get that nutrition from the whole food diet, but it's going to be in different amounts than what we may need. So yes, we're looking at making sure that, hey, if you have a lot of spinach in your diet, we may need to pull back on some of the phosphorus or the calcium that's going in, because we're getting a lot of phosphorus from that spinach of some sort. So we're looking at that. So it's not a one size fits all diet situation at all. It is sitting down, coming up with your different ingredients, and based off of those ingredients, coming up with what that micronutrition, microvitamin profile needs to look like.
Gotcha. Can cats and dogs benefit equally from a whole food diet, or would you recommend one over the other to receive a whole foods diet?
So both can definitely benefit from a whole food diet. Absolutely. But I will say cats are going to be your obligate carnivores. Gotcha. They are going to be the ones that need that higher animal protein content, as opposed to dogs are more omnivores. So they have a wider variety of food. In my experience, it is very challenging for a cat to be on strictly a whole food diet. And most of the time it's just due to how we introduce the diet to a cat as opposed to what we're feeding the cat. For dogs, it's the same thing. I mean, animals have their preferences just like we do. So it's trial and error and figuring out what works for them. But I would say dogs are much more adaptable and accepting to a whole food diet than cats are. It just takes, just being very patient and being very mindful that cats can be very particular creatures.
Gotcha. Now, when you said earlier that sometimes people are a little hesitant or reluctant versus somebody that is really excited to try a new diet for their dog, are there different ways in which you would have that person introduce a whole foods diet?
Yes.
What would that look like?
So one, treats. And if you've already, I've already started giving my pet treats, then I say, hey, let's add some protein. Let's add some protein on top of their food. I like to call it toppers. And that can be protein. That can be additional fruits and vegetables. It can be some bone broth. It can even be organ meat as well too. And nowadays we have these pre-made diets that are already nutritionally balanced by a veterinary nutritionist, and you can introduce those, not in its entirety, but again, just topping your pet's food with one of those diets will also give you insight on, hey, does my pet like this? Does my pet not like this? What changes am I seeing? Is this something that we could do long term?
Have you noticed that people aren't aware of some of those toxic foods that pets shouldn't have? Because I would assume that maybe somebody hears whole food and they think, okay, chicken, rice, potatoes, vegetables, and then next thing you know, they're giving their dog onions or something like that.
Right. And I always encourage owners, before you start this, do your research. And that's starting with looking up foods using ASPCA to look up their list of toxic foods for pets. Because when you introduce that whole food diet, you do get very comfortable with just kind of tossing your pet whatever you're cutting up that particular day, or feeding them something that has something in it that you didn't realize has it in it. So one, familiarizing yourself with what foods are toxic and you should not be giving your pet.
Definitely. I would love for you to share a story, if you have one off the top of your head, about a dog that you transitioned to a whole food diet that went from like struggling to thriving. If you can think of one off the top of your head.
Yeah, there's a few. So allergies are really big, especially in the South.
Yeah.
We have tons of environmental allergies, but also food allergies, and they oftentimes cross-react with each other. So I had one patient in particular who was red, itchy, skin was always irritated, hair loss as well too. We started with just doing a home cooked diet. The owner no longer necessarily wanted to give medications. She's like, this is getting costly, and I also don't want my pet so dependent on these medications. With a simple change in diet, within 3 weeks, that pet's stool was much better. He was no longer vomiting. He was excited about his food, and his skin drastically calmed down. We also started to see hair grow back as well too.
Love that.
I had another pet that was actually pregnant, and she was going to have puppies in a few weeks. And again, we got right in the middle of allergy season, and her dog just completely lost all its hair. And because the dog was pregnant, she was, I just cannot bring myself to give pharmaceutical medications to manage this condition. And I said, this is a little bit of a challenge because we're not only dealing with a medical condition such as allergies, but we're also having to feed for a pregnant dog as well too. And one, we got that dog's skin under control. Her hair grew back. The best thing of this was her puppies that she birthed. The owner was a breeder. The puppies that she birthed were 2 times the size of her previous litters. So it was very apparent that a whole home cooked diet was definitely the thing for that particular pet, even being pregnant.
Gotcha. We are going to jump into our Ask Me Anything. So we have some questions from our viewers that we would love to get your thoughts on.
Right.
So I'll just jump right into it. All right. So is it okay to feed my dog raw vegetables like carrots or broccoli as treats, or do they always need to be cooked?
No, if your pet enjoys raw vegetables, have at it. Again, make sure you know that some vegetables and out there, garlic, onions are toxic, can be toxic to pets, but have at it. And if they're resistant to it, cook it a little bit. If they're resistant to that, sometimes I'll add a little peanut butter onto it just to entice them to eat it.
All right, so next one. I have 2 Abyssinian cats and both really struggle to keep their wet food down. Can switching to a fresh whole food diet help with their digestive issues?
Short answer, yes. Diving a little bit deeper into that is, one, make sure that your pet doesn't have a medical condition. Cats vomit. I always tell people cats vomit. That's a thing. I won't say I want to say it's a normal thing, but there's
exceptions.
Right, exactly. But when your cat is vomiting on a routine basis, then at that point you need to dive deeper and figure out, hey, is there a medical condition? Do we have any type of inflammatory bowel disease? Is there any type of lymphoma of any sort going on? Starting there first. But in the meantime, you can add in foods, but just know that, hey, if there is some underlying medical condition, you may need something in addition to that home cooked diet, but definitely a good starting point. And remember, with cats, they're very sensitive creatures. So you always want to start slow with them, introducing usually just protein. They are not the ones that are needing a bunch of carbs or vegetables of any sort, just offering protein. They can be particular about the texture of food. They can be particular about the temperature of food as well too. So again, it is definitely a trial and error with with good old cats.
Do you have cats?
I do not have cats. I grew up with cats, but I don't have any. Yeah.
I'm not opposed to cats. I like cats. I don't read them as well as I read dogs. So dogs are my jam.
Yeah.
All right, I like this question. Is grain-free the same as whole food?
No, it is not. Grain-free is not. So grain-free diets are removing grains such as corn, wheat, rice. That's what is lacking in a grain-free diet.
I see.
A whole food diet is going to contain those grains in the food. Now, your grain-free diets still have grains, but they're different types of grains, such as quinoa, lentils, peas. That's what you're looking at with grain-free diets. So a whole food diet can be grain-free, but grain-free diets are not necessarily whole food. If that makes sense.
And earlier you talked about adding like rice. Is there a particular, is brown rice better than white rice for dogs, or is that again kind of like just depending on the dog?
It depends on the dog. dog, usually I go with white rice just because it's easily digestible. And that's why it's included in when people say, hey, well, what type of bland diet do I need to do? I'm like, always use white rice. It's just, they digest it easier.
Gotcha.
So I usually go that route. Also preference, most dogs, they prefer white rice than brown rice.
Okay. And the last one, I see a lot of human grade food products for pets. Is that the same as whole food?
No. So human grade just means that the ingredients that are put into that particular diet is safe for human consumption. It's been processed in a facility that's certified for human consumption.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that is a whole food diet, because there can be additional preservatives and additives that stuff's in our food all the time, and it's great for, human consumption.
Yeah.
So what you're looking for, a human grade diet is a plus, but you want to make sure that you have a human grade diet that has whole food ingredients and is not having those artificial preservatives or coloring or fillers in it.
Gotcha. Well, that's it for our questions. I've absolutely loved this conversation. It's a topic that, while I'm not necessarily an expert, it definitely drives home for me because my dogs are on whole food diet and I certainly know the benefits. So it's really been a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, and bravo for you for putting your dogs on whole food diets.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Whoa. Don't leave yet. I just want to say, if you want to hear more about health and pet care, check out these episodes of Care Experts. Also, before you go, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. New episodes drop every Wednesday. You don't want to miss it.